In a potentially massive blow to the Israel-Hamas peace process, Qatar has announced that it has suspended its work as a mediator for a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal. It said it would resume its work when Hamas and Israel show their willingness to negotiate. Qatar has informed both the Israelis and Hamas that as long as there is a refusal to negotiate a deal in good faith, they cannot continue to mediate. In a release put out on social media, Qatar termed reports that it had withdrawn completely from the process as inaccurate. It said that efforts to mediate are currently stalled. It said efforts would resume when both parties showed a willingness and seriousness to end the brutal war and suffering of people. Several news agencies reported on Saturday that Qatar had agreed with the US to tell Hamas to close its political office in Doha due to a refusal to negotiate a deal in good faith. But the foreign ministry said the reports were inaccurate. The claims have also been denied by Hamas officials. For months, Qatar, along with the US and Egypt, have been engaged in negotiations for a truce in Gaza, with the safe return of hostages in Hamas's captivity and release of Palestinian prisoners. The latest round of talks in mid-October failed to produce a deal, with Hamas rejecting a short-term ceasefire proposal. The group has always called for a complete end to the war and the full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. Israel has also been accused of rejecting deals. Israelis say Qatar's pulling out is a huge setback to any peace hopes.
לא מפתיע, אין הרבה עם מי לדבר, נראה לי ששני הצדדים בקושי מצליחים לדבר אחד עם השני, ועד שלא יהיה כאן מישהו שיקח את זה בידיים, לא נראה לי שהעסקה הזאת תתקדם לאיזה כיוון, וזה עצוב, פשוט עצוב.
Mr. Adrian Calamel is a fellow at Arabian Peninsula Institute, terrorism and Middle Eastern scholar and author of forthcoming book on Hezbollah. He's joining us live from New York. Mr. Calamel, good to have you with us again. What do you think is making Qatar fed up and give mixed signals on the future of the negotiations, despite them denying reports of them suspending their role in the talks?
Good to see you, Eric. Thank you for that's a great question. Yeah, Qatar is really trying to hedge its bets here because you have a new administration coming in the United States, one that is not going to be friendly towards Hamas, one that is probably going to put the spotlight on Qatar. We also have to remember that the Trump administration negotiated the Doha deal with the Taliban. And I think they've learned from the mistakes with that and how that can go terribly wrong. Mm-hmm. So Qatar, we have to remember that they are Hamas's major financial backer. And so Qatar has played this game for about a year, but now there's change in the U.S. administration and possibly a change in looking at, there's a lot of money that goes into Qatar from the United States, and is that going to be threatened?
Mr. Calamel, since Israel has not shown any interest in ceasing their onslaught on Gaza, what do you think will happen in the next 2 months, still under President Biden and prior to Trump returning to the White House, in regards to the truce and also the conflict in the entire West Asian region?
Great question again, Eric. It's it's been very difficult to predict what comes next with this war. 2 months, that's a lot of time. And my hope would be that we've come to an impasse really on ceasefire talks. And really the only way to end this war is to have Hamas sue for peace. That's the only way around this. And a couple things need to happen. The hostages need to be returned. That's going to be difficult because I believe it rests in the hands of the Islamic Republic. Mm-hmm. The Philadelphia corridor needs to be under control of either Israel or a country that is not going to allow smuggling in there so that this can happen again. Once these two things happen and a set of other deals, then we can talk about a ceasefire, peace deal, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, Hamas needs to say, we give up, we're done. Here are the hostages. Mm-hmm. This is the best possible deal for the Palestinian people to rebuild.
Let's talk about the new reality then. Do you share the wide optimism that most people seem to be having on Trump being the savior, as he has portrayed himself throughout his campaign, of West Asia and Ukraine? Or You choose to be one of the skeptical on the fence watchers.
Yeah, with Trump's foreign policy, he's very transactional in the way that he approaches things. He talks about ending the war in Gaza, ending the war in Lebanon, ending the war in Ukraine. I think he wants to find objectives. I think he's also going to take a look and say, who's the cause of the problems in the Middle East? It's the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have a policy in place. It's called the maximum pressure campaign. It was successful. Instead of working around the margins, let's go to the source and weaken the source of conflict in these wars. They're telling the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, the proxies in Iraq to pop off.
What about Ukraine?
Ukraine, that's another part where Trump is going to look at, we need clear objectives. We've never had clear military objectives. And without clear military objectives, it's difficult to know what the firepower is needed for Ukraine and what's the end game. And we don't know what the end game. So I think Trump needs some clarity on some issues here. So I hope he understands that the importance of Ukraine is tied to Israel and that conflict, as it is tied to any moves that Beijing may want to move. Because if Trump makes a deal with, let's say, Putin that's favorable towards Putin, I don't think that would happen. He needs to make one that is less favorable and is punitive towards Putin. That's the way you need to do this, and it sends a message to China as well as the Islamic Republic as well. He can't abandon the Ukraine effort, but he needs to find the best possible outcome.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. I've been talking to a fellow at Arabian Peninsula Institute, terrorism and Middle Eastern scholar, and also author of forthcoming book on Hezbollah, Mr. Adrian Calamel. As always, thank you very much for your time and for talking to us today.
Thank you, Eric. Pleasure.